projects are designed to cultivate multiple skill sets that complement a series of videos created for the purpose of acquiring a foundational knowledge of the Python programming language. These projects will cover coding both console-based and GUI applications. TK-Enter is a Python binding to the TK GUI toolkit, and its framework is built into Python's standard library, so it does not require the installation of any additional modules. This makes TK-Enter a convenient choice for building graphical interfaces for Python applications. All source code in these videos is available at the 1 byte at a time GitHub repository. You will find a link to the code used in each video beneath it, in its description and comment section. You may use these links to download the source code.
This is a Python project for practice with ASCII file access. So just saving to a file and reading back from a file with ASCII characters and text or comma-separated values like CSV files. Very common in multiple languages. And we're going to make like a simple address book or sort of a Rolodex. And it's going to create and store data in a CSV file and ASCII text. And we'll just have like field names, and then we'll have actual objects or, different entries for our objects. Let me pull this out so it makes a bit more sense there. All right. So here's our field values, just like a typical CSV file. Your field values will be the first line up at the top, and then your rows of data, so all our first names, and then email, mobile, and so forth, all the way through the file. Okay? And to do that, let's run the code real quick. All right, we don't have any friends loaded, so if I hit browse, I'll get nothing. And if I hit display, I'll get nothing. But if we load from the file, if I hit L to load from the CSV file, then we get all of these records here. So friend 1, friend 2, friend 3, friend 4, friend 5, 6, 7. And all this code will be on GitHub, so you can go through it and see, how it works, loaded up in Visual Studio Code. Now if I were to browse my friend index, now that I've loaded from file, here's the first and last names of each one. And I can display friends. All right, these are all my friends. And let's say I want to find a friend. I just can't find a friend. Can I find a friend? Let's look for Twilight, if I spell her name right. And, oh, no friends match S because I didn't spell her name right. Let's find a friend. I can't find a friend. Ah. All right, so there's Twilight Sparkle. I found a friend. Let's say I want to edit a friend. Select a friend by number, select a friend by name. I'm going to choose number, just easier. Let's say I want to edit friend 2. I want to edit Twilight. Choose an attribute to change. Let's say that her email changed. I'll choose attribute 3. What's her new email? Twilight Sparky at equestria.edu. She goes to Equestria University. Okay, so now that's her attribute. I've modified that. And if I were to display friends, then there's Twilight Sparkle, and there's her modified or new email address. Okay, say I want to remove a friend. Which friend do I want to remove? I want to remove myself. Select a friend as a note. Are you sure you want to delete this friend? And I'm going to say yes. Deleting friend. Enter to continue. Now, if I list my friends or browse, see, I'm gone. And let's say I want to save friends. So I've saved friend 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Enter to continue. And then I'm going to quit. So now, if I go back and check my CSV file, see, I'm gone. I have one less friend. I'm no longer a friend to myself. But do I need myself as a friend? I don't think so. I don't know, whatever. And if I were to rerun the program and load it, you'll see now that I'm gone when I load friends, right? Yeah, Twilight is still there, but now she's the first friend because I removed myself. So all the basic operations of a very simple address book or, database type project using a CSV file as our means of storing data. And you're like, why would anybody want to do that? But it's just good practice with file access. So let's go through here and look at some of the things that we need. I've imported CSV for using comma separated value files, OS for operating system and system. So we have created a class here. We wanted to write a class for a basic friend. And all these data members would be what a friend, these are the attributes, the data members I want to store with a friend. Here's the constructor. Remember, the constructor always starts with underscore underscore init underscore underscore. And not necessarily always, but almost always, you always pass in the self attribute. Works like the this pointer in C++, allows you to get to the data members within the class itself, defined statically within that class definition itself. Okay? And I'm just going to assign whatever I happen to pass into the constructor to those values. Okay? And within the friend class, we want to combine what a friend is, which are the data members, with what a friend does. Well, how do you look at a friend? How do you display a friend? These are all this function here will just go through and display using the self attribute, basically the this pointer. All of the attributes are data members of that friend object. How do you create a new friend? Well, we need to get information from the end user, right? And once the end user gives us that information as a string, we'll store it in the appropriate attribute using the self attribute. How do you edit a friend? Well, first you have to choose what attribute you want to edit. Once you've decided on what friend to choose, and then you'll take that input as a string. And then if, depending on what they chose, what attribute they chose to edit, we'll edit the appropriate attribute. And that ends our friend class. So we've defined a class, and then we need a method and some functions to make use of our class definition of our friend class. So we basically have a while true loop here to give them a menu, and they can select some options. So from our menu, each option they select calls a corresponding function. So let's take a look at browse friends, okay? Browse friends simply calls list all friends. And you have a dashes here as a separator, but what does list all friends do? It's just going to iterate through every single element in our group of friends list object, our array. And it's just going to display a condensed version of that record. So row by row, it'll display first name and last name of all the friends we have stored in our CSV file. Okay, that's all that does. Now that's browse friends. What about display friends? Now display friends is a bit more detail. Okay, so if we display friends, then we're going to iterate through every single element in our array that we've read in from our CSV file, or that the end user inputted manually. But this time we're going to call the display friend method on each one of those objects. So that's going to give us a lot more detail, because what does display friend do? Remember, we wrote our friend class up here. And in our friend class, display friend displays all the attributes of a friend. So based on the menu choice, this gives us a condensed version, just first and last name. This gives us all the data members, all the attributes of that friend class object, okay? And then we have load friends and save friends. So let's take a look at save friends first, okay? We'll look at save friends. What happens with save friends? So we're going to create a file, and we want to get the current directory that our script is running from. So that's what we're using OS for, get current working directory. And we're going to concatenate that together with the name of our file, okay? And then once we do that, we're going to remove the friend's data path, and the file will be, we're going to open that file name to write it to a file. And CSV writer, we're going to create a CSV writer to write to a CSV file for comma separated values. The file and the delimiter is going to be a comma. That's usually the default for a CSV file, hence comma separated values, but it could be something else if we wanted. CSV writer, and then we're going to write a row. A row is a record, okay? And a record is going to be, these are all the field names: first name, last name, email address, mobile phone, street, city, state. So the very first line up at the top of the file, right? We're writing this line. These are our variable names, our field values. And then beneath that first line will be our record set. These are all our records, rows of records one by one, and each of them has fields that correspond or are mapped to these values up top here. See? See how that works? So we create that first, and then we're going to cycle through every element, every friend class object that's been instantiated and stored in our list or array of group of friends. And we'll just, we're being very verbose here to make this transparent and hopefully, easy to follow. Saving that friend. And then we're going to write a row. And then in that row, we're just going to write the appropriate data from our friend object. Okay? Each friend object that we go through. So for each friend and group of friends, and we're just going to write their data members as a row. And then we'll close the file. Okay? And then enter to continue. Well, load a friend just pretty much does the reverse. Save friends created the friend CSV file and saved everything. Load friends will just load that file. So we're going to take, if there's anything, if they click on load and they might have other things in there, but we're just going to erase it. We're going to dump it. So, a more improved version, you might want to put a warning here. Hey, are you sure you want to overwrite this, or do you want to do this in a separate file, yada, yada, yada. But we're keeping it simple for now. So we're just going to clear and dump any data in that array because we're going to refresh it with new data that we load from a file that we previously saved. Okay? So same thing, we get the current working directory. Here's the file name. We open up a CSV reader object to load our friends. Null equals next on our CSV reader. So we want to skip the first line, right? Remember that the first line is not a valid record. The first line is just variable names, right? This isn't a record. These are the field names or the variable names. The records begin from the second line and then forward. So that's what we want to. We want to make sure that we skip that line. So hence what we do next to skip that. And then we're just going to read in for every friend and CSV reader, for every row, right? Each record stored. We'll increment friend counter. And then we're going to take our friend object, okay, and loading. And we're going to say, in this array here, we're going to store the string, all the string values stored for those field values, for each of those field values there. We're going to populate our array with those values. Then we're going to build or create, instantiate a new friend class object. And once we do, we're going to populate its data members with the values of everything stored in that array. You could actually cut out this step. You could directly read that content in and assign it. But I like to do it this way because that way you could store everything in an array and then you don't have to, constantly read the values from a file object. It's up to you how you want to do it, but anything that we do in memory is going to be more efficient or faster than anything that we're doing with I/O, but that's up to you. Either way, it's good practice with file access, with arrays and subscript values in those arrays, okay? And finally, once we get our new friend object populated with all the appropriate values that we read from the file, we're going to pop them on or append them to our group of friends array object. And so for every single row in the file, it's just going to go through and instantiate the class of object and then populate its attributes with all the field values of that record as it loads all these in. See? Let's go back to our menu and see what else we have in store. So we've gone over browse, display, save, load. What about find a friend? how do we find a friend? Okay, we will, let's go to find a friend now. Find a friend, we're going to ask the end user, enter the first name and the last name, and there's lots of ways you could code it. You could and it, force both to be true. You could or it, so they could just only have to match the first name or the last name. Sky's the limit on how you could modify this code. But basically, you want to take some input from the end user to allow them to search, and then you're going to iterate or cycle through all of the friend class objects stored in your list and look for, hey, first name, evaluate to the first name data member attribute of the internal class data member, stored in that object, or last name, and you look for a match. And if you find a match, found a friend is true. If found a friend is false, hey, no friends matching. Okay, no friends matching there. And then hit enter to continue, all right? Otherwise, found a friend would be true. Let's go back up to, oh, hungry there, sorry. So let's go to add a friend. Sorry, haven't eaten breakfast or lunch today. Just lots of coffee. All right, so add a friend. We're just going to instantiate a new friend, and we're going to go call the new friend method, which will just simply take us through filling out all the data, right? Populating all the data and adding it to that friend class object. So that's all we're doing there. To edit a friend, let's go look at edit a friend. Edit a friend, we'll give the end user two options. Select a friend by number, which I think is more convenient, or select a friend by name if they just wanted to go right, cut to the chase and select that friend by name. But either way, we'll edit friend by number or edit friend by name. If they choose edit friend by number, then okay, edit friend by number. So we need to make sure that it's a number, hence is numeric. We're checking to make sure it's a number. Choice is numeric, converting to integer. If the selection is greater than equal to 1 and selection is less than equal to the length of the number of elements in the array, we need just doing a little bit of validation, a little bit of masking here in the sense that we don't want a garbage value that is outside of, otherwise it'll crash our program, right? So we don't want them to input -5, or we don't want them to input a number greater than the number of actual friends or friend class objects stored in the list. Okay? And so if it's within the valid range, then we'll select that object, group of friends, selection -1, because remember the fence post, that off by one issue with arrays, iterables, list type objects, and then we'll display the friend, and then we'll call edit friend, which is inside the class. Remember, those were methods or functions. In a class, we combine what an object is with what an object does. So there's display a friend and there's edit a friend. And they can pick an attribute, and then we'll take in input as a string and we'll set that attribute, okay? That's if they choose to edit by number. And if they choose to edit by name, how do we do that? We just ask them enter the first name, enter the last name, and we're going to go through every single friend class object, and we're going to look and say, hey, if the first name and the last name match, or you could do or, and they'd only have to match one if you wanted to make it more forgiving or less precise. A lot of ways to modify that, but basically we'll do the same thing, right? Display the friend, and then we'll let them edit the friend, okay? So that covers our menu items, our menu choices. And then finally, what about remove a friend? If they remove a friend, how do we do that? Again, we have to check for input, make sure that it's valid, it's numerical, not some garbage or gobbledygook that could crash our program. And we also want to check if it is numerical, we still need to check the range. It needs to be greater than or equal to 1 and less than the number of elements, right? We don't want a value like -5, which would crash, or some element higher than the maximum number of friend class objects that have been stored in our list. So selected friend is within the valid range. If it's within the valid range, then we'll simply take that friend, and then we're just gonna little bit of protection here. Are you sure you want to delete this friend? We'll convert it to lowercase because we don't care if it's capitalized or not. And if it's yes or Y, we'll delete the friend. If we do, we'll use the pop method to get rid of the friend class object stored at that location. Remember -1. You got to offset for the fence post. And then otherwise, if they choose no's, okay, the friend remains aborting. And that's what we'll do there. And that's it. That's our basic file access program. Again, this code is on GitHub, so you can download it, load it up in Visual Studio Code, play with it, modify it, and it should help you get a better understanding of file access, writing plain text to a file and using CSV files in Python.